I have a signature talk once every year. It happens in February. 2 years ago, it was on engagement marketing and the difference between content marketing, and that was a new concept at that time. Now everyone's doing that. Last year, it was the whole idea of the blindside revolution, and that is something that also became my signature talk during the year as something quite different. I'm going to share a little bit about that today. And today, we have got something very new and different, which is really what Genius is about, and it's where we're all going. It's something called learning networks. I'm going to be showing for you what this concept is, why it's so important, and why it's so necessary for where we are. However, before we get started, because we have got the camera at the back, which is going to be viewing me generally as I'm sharing, and I want everyone to just be aware that we're actually at a lodge in Africa, and people from all around the world have come to it. Could everyone just get up for a moment, come to the middle, and wave to the camera over here so everyone can see that you're actually real people in the room? So we have got everyone here, and Danny's coming into it as well. All right, so everyone give a big wave. Okay, everyone say hello world. Hello world. All right, okay, thank you. Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you, guys. The whole team here, everyone who is here is a partner of Entrepreneurial Institute. So we've been having our partner conference. Come next year, we'll be running our one next year here in South Africa as well. And we are now going to be starting our presentation, and we're ready to roll. I hope you like my slides. I've worked very hard at them. Here's my first one here, which is all about the year of the monkey. So monkeys, as you know, have all sorts of mischievousness about them. Within monkeys, you will find the word money, you'll find the word keys. So I'm going to be using these three elements, bring them all together in terms of, first of all, what is the fundamental way we need to be, which is the monkey bit. What is the elements which actually we need in order for us to be able to move forward, which is the keys part, and how money itself has changed and the ways it has changed. So first of all, I'm going to start by just rewinding 1 year. So 1 year ago, I was talking about something called the blindside revolution to make sense of the massive shift that's happening in the world. And I used this example from the Battle of Trafalgar. So what happened in the Battle of Trafalgar is you had a very, very small navy, which was managed by Admiral Nelson, which was able to take down the entire navy of Napoleon. And how did that happen? Well, it was by coming from the blind side. See, when you come from the blind side, you have this ability to surprise even Superman. And we are seeing large corporations that are falling as a result of getting surprised from a side they're not seeing, from right angles. This is exactly what happened when Admiral Nelson basically created two columns and basically came directly at the armada of Napoleon's, which is something that had never happened before, so they weren't expecting it. So, in fact, normally they would actually all get themselves organized in a row, and the reason they did that was because they all had to see the signal ship to see what they were meant to do, because they didn't have things like mobile phones and WhatsApp in those days. So they had to actually watch and see, whereas Napoleon just said, okay, every man for himself, let's just go for it. And when we actually hit them, because they're going to find it very difficult to hit us, because we're going to be coming to them basically from the blind side. As we do that, we'll just turn around and we keep on coming around again and again and shooting them. And of course, because their ships were actually set up in a way that it was very difficult to shoot back, they pretty much sank most of the Navy. So this is exactly what's been happening out there with all the large companies. We have got the industrial age, which is based on these 12 different industries, and they're being blindsided, right? So these are all the ones that we hear about, we learn about, that are fundamentally designed as part of the industrial complex. And these 12 are actually being blindsided by 12 main technologies. Now, I talked about this a year ago, and the transformation in many of these technologies in the last year has been phenomenal. You know, we talked about things like sensors and cameras, the Internet of Things. That entire industry has more than tripled in the last year. We talk about things like machine learning and AI, and we've had some massive breakthroughs just in the last year in terms of artificial intelligence. Mobile video, we're now going to 3D video, robotics and drones. You know, Google's actually been buying up all the robotics companies. We've got things like the entire electric side, where solar power has really taken off in ways that in the last year we've never seen before. In fact, in close to half the world now, we've actually got grid parity for solar. And within a year, the vast majority of all the states in the US and most of the countries in the world will actually have solar cheaper than it is to get the normal gas and fossil fuels, which is pretty unbelievable. So we're seeing this acceleration that's actually taking place at the moment. So this basically is a number of slides I showed a year ago about how Apple was not a particular company like entertainment or communication. It actually went into the music industry, and then it went into the phone industry. And then now it's going into the finance, it's going to transport. Like now there's more and more news about the Apple car, and how actually the way it's disrupting every one of these industries one by one is through these different things like the crowd leverage, the artificial intelligence, the sensors. It's just going through them one by one and using them for every one of these industries, even more so for Amazon, even more so for Google. And this whole point here, which is that the education system is actually still based on preparing our kids for the industrial age. Everything I'm showing now is what was my talk last year, and I just want to give you a background of it, because there's one thing that has not necessarily kept up with all of the growth, and that's the way we learn. Like how do we actually keep up with this? There's a great video from just a month ago where now there is a computer that was from a company, artificial intelligence computer, built by a company in UK, which Google bought over, which has now beat the European champion of Go. Go is a Chinese game, which is far, far more complex with many, many more variations in terms of gameplay than even chess. And so it was kind of like this holy grail of artificial intelligence if you could actually beat a Go player. And the way that the person who actually managed to get the machine to learn is, first of all, they took all of the big championship games from the last couple of years, or from the last decade, they fed it all into the computer, so the computer could actually just watch patterns and say, what's happening when this happens, this happens, this happens. And then after they did that, he got the computer to play itself millions and millions and millions of times. So every time it was learning and every time it was growing. So if computers are now learning more effectively than humans are learning, where does that leave us? So this here was about industrial revolution focusing on profit. Technological revolution is focusing on purpose. A lot of people get misunderstood as to why it is that Elon Musk would want to, spend so much money on his electric cars, or why, someone like Mark Zuckerberg would want to go and give free internet in India. And so there's a lot of assumptions, which is they must be doing it for their own personal gain, when you still got Mark Zuckerberg like driving a cheap car around town, because it's really not about the money. So you say, well, then if it's not about the money, what is it about? And it's about shifting from these profit streams to these purpose streams. And they actually link to each other. So at this point, we still don't have artificial intelligence at a form where it's purpose-driven. We still don't have purpose-driven computers. So one thing that differentiates us as humans from our technology is that we tend to be purpose-driven, or if you are efficiency-driven, or if you are effectiveness-driven, you're going to be beaten by technology already. But if you're purpose-driven, well, then you actually stand out and you're a little bit different. And we ourselves are noticing that we are becoming more purposeful. The millennials will say they're far more interested in purposeful, meaningful work than they are in the amount of money they earn. I mean, you still need money, but that's not the main motivation as to why they do it. And so you've got this element towards purpose with the world of unintended consequences. So this is a picture that I was showing earlier this week from the Mobile Congress, where you have all these people with their virtual cameras on, and then this whole dystopia of like, where is the world leading, and what are we actually doing as humans to not get swallowed up by the technology? So that's what this talks about. It's like, what can we do different? Luckily, it is the year of the monkey. So I have a monkey theme. And first of all, let me just tell you what the experts of zodiacs will tell us, right? What they'll say is that it is a year of risk and opportunity. So in Chinese mythology, I'm a monkey, so I know about monkeys, so born in 1968. Monkeys are metal and water creatures. So we talk about elements a lot. Metal is all about structure, it's all about money, whereas water is all about spirit and connected to wisdom. So this is a year when, and it's a fire monkey year this year, right? So basically it means dramatic events are going to happen. They've actually already started happening, if you hadn't noticed. There's huge shifts already that have taken place. We've had a more turbulent start to the year in terms of our currencies, our stock markets, than in any other year in the last 20 years, right? It's just been a pretty incredible start to the year. And it's a year of self-education. So Year of the Monkey is all about taking risks and being rebellious, a year where agile, inventor minds, sheer guts, and bravado will win out. Key success this year, education. Take up courses that matter for your everyday life, not just for your career or status. Run with ideas, embrace the inventive, and don't look back. This is, by the way, just kind of taken straight off one of the astrology websites. But the point is that we're living at a time where these 4 monkeys are more important than ever. So I showed this slide earlier this week as well. It's more than just the 3 monkeys, it's 4 monkeys. And the one at the back has got a mobile phone. And I have divided them up in the 4 to hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, and don't be evil. Don't be evil. Don't be evil is the motto that was in the Google prospectus when it listed the company. All right, don't be evil is this whole idea that you can do anything you want as long as you're not evil. And it's kind of interesting because each of these are basically in the ancient philosophy. Each of these is about the fact that as long as you're seeing or hearing or speaking the negative, you're creating a filter to let in the positive. And as long as you're doing that, then you're missing the opportunities which are right in front of you. You're missing the connections that are right in front of you. I mean, hands up who here in this room, by just being in a more positive environment, have opened you up yourself to more opportunities by being here. We see this is what happens the moment you have a guard up, the moment you're in an environment where you actually have to put safety first and you've got to have this veil of distrust before you get to trust, then the longer it takes to actually be able to even spot the opportunities or frankly even think about the opportunities yourself that you can bring to yourself as well. So much about this year is about the speed of trust. It's about how can you actually accelerate that and how can you actually get to a point where the things you will learn this year and the way you accelerate your learning will be far beyond what you could do on your own. So how does that happen? And Hear No Evil is about growing your community. It's about, okay, so if it wasn't all about the noise, and I don't just say evil is something which does bad, I say evil is something that wastes. Anything that wastes your time is evil, right? Anything that wastes resources is evil. Anything that wastes good, smart thought processes or talent is evil. It's all stuff which is a net negative. And this world would be a whole lot better off if we're focusing as a net positive. So this is about, well, how do you build your community around the things that you have in common, which are positive? In terms of speaking no evil, growing your message, how do you grow a message which is positive? When it comes to seeing no evil, how do you grow your brand in a way which is positive? What do you stand for? And then in terms of don't be evil, how do you grow your business also by looking at those positive elements? And how do you actually take those positive elements and articulate them in a way that others can learn from them as well? So everyone out there right now is looking for leading learners more than teaching teachers. And a leading learner is someone who's going, okay, I just learned something new which I can actually use, and more importantly, that I can share. This morning I did a Facebook post this morning, which was just really simple. It's like, here's 3 different things that I can share. And that's already going viral. Like, just because people think, great, I'm going to have it. Why am I having it? Not just because I want to read it, I want to share it with other people as well. So there is definitely ripples that go out there now on social media where things that are positive tend to actually have ripples which are larger and faster than things that are negative, which is the opposite of the media. So social media has got to that point where people are tired of the negative and they're actually wanting to share more of the positive as well, which means it's easier than ever to find the right people around you. So you make that decision as to how much of what you're doing or thinking is wasting time or is wasting effort or is wasting other people's attention. How can you transform that around? And then realize that in that whole process, money itself has changed the nature. By the way, there is kind of something that we've all heard of as we were younger, which is money is the root of all. So after talking about see no evil, hear no evil, and it's like money, evil. So the reason a lot of us don't see a lot of money is because we actually see it as a negative thing, right? And we see it as something which is a net negative, which is that if I'm gonna be rich, you're gonna be poor, right? And that whole concept we know isn't true, because we know when we actually collectively get together, we can actually add value, which means that the end is a bigger pie for everybody. And this is one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing in the world today, this wealth gap. And a lot of people will see the wealth gap as a zero-sum game, a little bit like there's only so much money, which means there's only so much pie. And as long as there's only so much money and you've got this pie and it's fixed, then if I'm going to have some of the pie means you can't have the pie. So that's where the wealth gap comes in. It's like, well, clearly the rich have all the money, and that's where the issue is. As opposed to really looking at that gap, being a little bit more like, you and I are in a race and we're running along, and there's not that much of a gap, but then I get on a bicycle and we run it again, and you don't have a bicycle, and this time there's a bigger gap. And that's really what happens when you learn how to run a business, for example, or when you learn how to leverage value via the internet or via whatever it is that you do. There's basically a vehicle you've now got you didn't have before. And then that bike becomes a motorbike, and now the gap's got bigger, and then that motorbike becomes an aeroplane, and the gap's now very, very large. And the difference between someone who knows how to ride the vehicle and someone who doesn't is that gap. That's the wealth gap. So we have this element where those who are self-learning, because you don't learn these things at the moment at school, those who are self-learning are getting there faster. And I know many small business owners who are now going through the same disruption that large companies are going through. Small business owners who are saying, well, I thought I was nimble because I got my own business, but even I'm having a difficult time finding customers now. I'm having a difficult time catching up and keeping up with technology. So the vehicle keeps on upgrading faster than any one of us can learn on our own, which means that we need a whole new way for us to be thinking about this as we go forward. So while you could say that money is evil, the opposite of evil, which is the same letters, just the other way around, is life, that it is actually moving at an entirely different pace right now, that it is what allows us to be more alive, and that it is something which is actually finding its home far faster to where value is. So it's actually able to get attracted much faster to value, which means if you're not there on top of the value, you're going to lose the money. But it also means if you're clear on what the value is, then the money will come to you much faster and give you the resources to do more of what is purposeful to you. As Walt Disney says, I don't make films to make money, I make money to make films. So unless you're clear on your purposefulness, then the money won't flow your way, because the only way it's going to flow your way is through the other people who are aligned with that same purpose. But the biggest challenge is that it's accelerating, which means that the speed of money flow is growing much faster. There was a time before that if I was to see how much a dollar might move within a day, I might see that it actually moves basically by someone going in and buying a book. And by buying that book in the retail store, that guy's taking his money in, it goes to the retail store owner. Maybe if he's really fast, he might take it out of the till and basically put it in the bank, and the bank's got a chance to actually loan it out to someone or to invest it in something in the same day, which means it might have 2 cycles or 2 transactions within a day. Today, you can go on in the morning, go onto Amazon, make a payment straight away. The money's gone out of your account and it's now in Amazon's account. They've already used it because they've actually spent that on the transportation, and now it's actually with FedEx, and FedEx already has spent it because they already actually have sent it again digitally to someone where basically they're now using it, an airline, and that airline's now spent it on fuel, and the fuel has now spent, and so it goes on. So now you could actually transact the same dollar 7 or 8 or 9 times in the same day, and it's handed up basically through 7 or 8 different people. That's basically how money actually flows. It's not about the total supply, it's about the speed of pace of flow. And if you actually increase this pace of flow, what happens is everyone ends up experiencing far more flow through themselves during the day as well. So this whole element of accelerating, challenge with that is we don't necessarily know how to keep up the old ways of doing things. Now, here's where my main talk for today comes in, that there are now some new structures that are being created which allow us to accelerate our own thinking. And the good news is we're right in one of those structures right now, but we're going to put a name to it as well. And the first thing I want to share is the concept of entrepreneurial capitalism. It isn't the tip of the iceberg. When we're talking about money, money actually shows up at the tip of the iceberg. At the top, which you can just see, is something called financial capital. So this concept that there's a fixed pie is this idea that we have to have financial capital to get started, or the people who have financial capital, who have the money, that they're the ones who somehow are taking it away from other people. But what's underneath the iceberg are the 2 things that we can get for free every day just by investing some of our time. And they're actually the 2 bits of capital which every entrepreneur who's ever got successful had before they got to the financial capital. One of them is called intellectual capital. So when you start a business, when you have a product, when you have an idea, when you've got something of value that someone's willing to give you money for, it doesn't cost you any money to create any of that. It just is inventiveness, is connections, is getting to the right idea in the right way. And when you have a great idea, then that can be worth $1 billion very quickly. And this is about focusing not on how do I get the money, it's focusing at how can I have that right idea or work with the people who have that right idea. Right? And that's what really builds the value in people who are understanding these vehicles today. Understanding how valuable intellectual capital could be is something we could teach kids at school. When we, myself and with Luke, with Fibonacci blocks, which is his project at school, I said, well, if you really got something of value, you'll know if it's of value because people want to buy it. Posted it up on Facebook saying, would anyone want to buy this? Had a whole bunch of people say, we'd like to buy it. Set up an Indiegogo campaign, which created $42,000, which is more than most teachers earn. And as a result of that, I said, well, not only does this clearly create value, I've now turned some of my intellectual capital into financial capital. And it really is that simple, but it isn't something that's actually necessarily taught at schools, and we don't actually see or have any exam or any test to a child to see if they actually have a way to turn something into financial value, and if that's a skill that they can build. And every one of us can build it if we're taught it. But this part here is what we have to self-learn, either ourselves going to a course or meeting up with a mentor, or is something we can self-learn through what I'm going to come to in a moment, which is this idea of learning networks. There's a second thing, which actually is the part which a lot of us miss out on. In fact, there's a lot of online networks and online websites now where you can go to build your intellectual capital, to come up with your idea, to come up with your strategy. Most of them don't work that well because you're still in isolation trying to do it on your own, which is a little bit like being at school trying to learn on your own. So there's these things called MOOCs, which are these massive online courses, which really aren't working that well. Less than 10% of the people that start it even finish it because there's no interaction. And it's missing the second thing you actually need to create the triangle, which is social capital. So social capital are the people you know. It's the people you're connecting with. And it's the whole way that we collectively can have far smarter ideas and a better idea as to what people actually want to buy or what's important to them by having those conversations and by knowing the right people. And frankly, you don't even need the intellectual capital if you know the people who have the intellectual capital. So whatever you want to do, create a website, start business in China, if you know the person who already knows how to do that, you don't need to know how to do that yourself. So these two go hand in hand, where if every day you're saying, well, how's my network growing? How's my ideas or my products growing? How's my relationships growing? How are my brands growing? If these two just grow, the iceberg just appears. And so this is the element behind capitalism, is it's not the top capital, it's all three capitals put together, and it's us having a system that allows all three to grow together as well. If we could create a system that allowed that to happen, then we'd be in nirvana, because it would mean that we'd be able to accelerate our own learning to be at the pace that's taking place and the speed of change that's taking place right now within technology. So that's where I believe global learning networks come in. A learning network is different from a social network. There's 4 elements here. The first element is something that we're all used to because we were brought up in the entire national government system where we have something called social hierarchies. And a social hierarchy, think of it like a triangle, is one where you've got a president or prime minister at the top, very similar to a business where you have a CEO or general manager at the top, and where everything's based on direction, where someone is in charge of directing you. So our education system is based this way as well, right? Someone's there to direct you. But in this case, any business or company, especially a corporation, and at the same time, most of the social structures that we used to or were brought up in, this is the kind of thing that we show up in, where we have social classes, where it's really clear whether you're basically blue collar or white collar or whether you're executive. It's very clear whether you are allowed to do something or not allowed to do something. So it's rule-based, it's directive. So we understand that. Something happened the moment social networks showed up. And what happened was, for the first time ever, we started seeing the difference of incremental actions and exponential actions. We suddenly realized you can just go out to everyone, everywhere, really quickly, and you can actually overthrow governments with social media. We can actually, through a social network, get connected in such a way that we can learn about things or hear about things that we never would have known otherwise. It was only in my 40s I even realized that there was foods I was allergic to. I would go out and I'd drink beer, and then I'd start sneezing. And I'd think, oh, this just must be because, I've just drunk too much beer, right? And then I found if I drank even more beer, then the sneezing would go away. So that was my antidote to the sneezing. Yeah, and it was only after Facebook came along and people started sharing stuff, and then I figured out, well, wait, I'm actually allergic to wheat, and beer has wheat in it, and so that's actually what's triggering me, and it's actually what's actually making me sneeze, and the only way to stop me from sneezing is to hydrate myself, and beer also has water in it. So that was this thing that was happening where as long as I kept on drinking beer, then it would dilute the effect of the beer itself. I was like, this is nuts. I'm just going to stop drinking beer, which I did, right? So now I drink Jack Daniels. So the point about this is that a lot of that learning, a lot of us, I think, have learned a lot more about health in the last 5 years simply because of social networks. And every time a new idea comes along, if it's a good idea, we learn about that as well. So there's a viral aspect to this which allows us to keep up with things around the world a lot faster through a social network. But it's still actions. It's still reactive. But now it's not based on single direction. It's based on shared discovery. It's what are we discovering and what are we sharing with each other. But it doesn't mean anything's changing. It just means things get more noisy. So something's happening on the top level now, which is happening only for the first time, now that we understand this concept. First of all, we know that there's an element, which is the learning element, where we're going from incremental actions to incremental learning. So whereas we've moved across from incremental actions to exponential actions, we're still in an education system which is based on incremental learning. And this incremental learning is progress now, just like we had actions, but it's progress by single direction. You go to a lot of the online courses, it's like you've still got a tutor who's going to teach you through videos. So what's happening is you can only learn whatever they're teaching you. Just like here, you can only be as good as whoever's directing you. And so that's been how we are still basically living in a learning hierarchy, which is based on learning classes as opposed to social classes. And it's allowing us to progress, but our progress is still at an incremental level, while technologically and socially, we've gone exponential already. So this final quadrant here is what I'm talking about when we talk about Genius U, when we're talking about different groups around the world, where we're talking about the fact that we now have CEOs and general managers and founders of companies who, for the first time, are saying, you know what, the only way for us to keep up is to get together and to talk to each other. Whereas in the past, it's like, I don't want to talk to my competitors because if I do, they're going to take my ideas. Today, in every industry, people are realizing by staying together and actually sharing, they're better off as a net positive for the whole industry than if they actually stayed out of that gap. And that's because they're learning about this thing here, which has started in small scales. I'm part of quite a number of different mastermind groups in America. We have our own as well. We started small scale, but where this starts to happen here. And this fourth one here is a learning network. A learning network's called a learning network not just because the people in it are there to learn and progress, but because the network itself learns at a pace beyond what each individual can learn, because they're sharing best practice. And so when they share it, everyone gets it, then the next person will, and you don't know who's going to make the next breakthrough. But when you've got like the law of numbers, someone's going to make a breakthrough before you do, and if they're sharing it back, everyone learns that, and so you have exponential learning that takes place, which means you have exponential progress that takes place as well. And this is starting to happen, and I'm going to show you some examples of where it's happening and what it means to us as well. So this is where you now have got progress by shared discovery, where it's not about one person saying, I'm the expert, I'm going to teach you how to do this. You're actually having people learning every day and sharing their learning, getting the best learning, and then going from there. Provided you're able to curate that learning and saying, here's the best stuff, and then people can spot it quickly, use it, and then come back with more feedback. This is exponential learning now. And this is really where the whole world is going. If you're not part of a network within your industry or in your field, which is allowing exponential learning to take place, you're either going to be overtaken by someone else in some other country or some other group, or probably more likely by technology itself. And some examples, just going through this concept, first of all, of exponential learning. Exponential times require exponential learning. While social networks have led to exponential growth in how we receive and share information as a group, learning networks are leading to exponential growth in our development as a group. Learning networks are not just networks for learning, but networks that learn. And by rapidly sharing what works now, everyone in the network learns exponentially. Examples. It's amazing the shift that's happened in terms of the tricks that any kind of like daredevil or extreme sportsman can do now, whether it's on a skateboard or whether it's in the big waves or whether it's down a mountain on skis, compared to what they could do even just 5 years ago. Because things that people thought were impossible, people are posting them onto YouTube and saying, look what I just did, and others go, well, I'll try that out as well. They're doing it and then improving on that as well. So you've got basically the entire way that sports is growing within the areas that are sharing it. You've got other sports that aren't actually sharing them on YouTube. They're not really growing at all. They're staying exactly the same. But you've seen that happen. Crowdfunding sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter, what makes them so good is the fact that you're not just seeing which are the most successful, you're seeing how they made themselves successful. You're seeing what video they put together. How did they organize their perks? What messaging they put together. So when we put the Indiegogo campaign together for Luke, and he's 16 years old, we didn't just start by saying, figure it out for yourself. We started by saying, well, what are examples of toys just like your one, educational toys, that were successful? What video did they put together? How did they go about doing it? We connected up with some people like Jeff Hayes, who's an expert at crowdfunding, got his advice of a number of others who've done it as well. And just by getting all of that together, we effectively compressed into the worth of all the learning of the entire crowdfunding industry. Right? And that's because everyone was sharing and it was being curated, so the top was going to the top. You could see it, it was really clear, and we could learn from that as well. Genius U, which is our network, this is what we're designing it to do. You'll hear more about Genius U this afternoon. Anyone who's watching here, you can go straight on Genius U. It's free. But what we're doing with Genius U is we're starting to create that point system, which Michelle talked about. And we're going to be putting a point system in place where, while something like Wikipedia allows you to organize knowledge based on fixed knowledge, with Genius U, we're organizing information and learning based on real-time learning. If someone has a great book that they think is a great book, they can put that up and say, look, I've got this really good book on sales and marketing at the moment. Someone else can look at that book and go, well, actually, it's not just for everyone, but this is definitely really good for yellow level stars. And so they can tag it as that. And so now that's actually now being created within the community, yellow level stars. You can have people say, actually, I really like that book, so I'm going to vote that one up, or I don't actually like that book so much, so I'm not going to vote it up. So very quickly, you're at a point where if you show up onto that network and you're at the yellow level and you're a star, it's going to tell you this is the one thing that you need to do today which would be the most valuable because the network's already told you this is the most valuable. And that's something which no AI can do for you because this is about human interaction and human learning coming in with the experiences of it. And then with that book, when someone actually reads it and then says, you know what, I actually used this and came out with a case study which actually works really well, and I learned something new about that, and they post that, and they get rewarded for that as well. And as a result, you actually then have a chain of real-life examples off the back of that one piece of information. That information becomes more and more valuable the longer it's there, as opposed to just disappearing off your wall or off your stream. And so the power of this in terms of having thousands or tens of thousands of people who are focused at entrepreneurship and who are basically supporting each other to make this work, that's where the power of this really comes in. Then you can be a school leaver, you can join the network, and immediately you can find the right people to work with, you can find the right things to learn. You can actually even be earning just by curating to begin with, and off the back of that, you don't have to have a worry about never having a job, because jobs already are something which are becoming redundant in themselves. People used to be worried about redundancies. Jobs themselves are becoming redundant. So off the back of that, it means that we need to have a whole new way of thinking. I believe that learning networks is one step on from what I talked about last year, which was here's the challenge, which is that technologies are coming at right angles. Here now is a solution to how we actually keep up with that. And we now have a name for it that we can use. And what's important is to start identifying what are the top learning networks that are out there and how we can actually, just like social networks got started, and then you had a couple of key ones that launched, we can actually do the same thing for learning networks now as well. So with that being shared so far, I'm going to be asking in a moment for people to share whatever's biggest learning that you're getting from what I'm sharing here. But first of all, I wanted to just add this little picture, which is what I posted this morning. This is Alvin Toffler, who was around some time ago. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And everything I'm sharing is about this. It's about that ability to learn. So I mentioned 3 keys, right? Here are the 3 keys that I believe are the 3 keys that allow us to do that. These 3 keys I have shared to this group earlier, but I'm going to do it now here as well because it's relevant to everybody. It's the 3 keys that actually make up the philosophy of Entrepreneurs Institute. And they're the 3 keys around learning itself. But now I'd like to apply this to learning networks. I personally believe that every great learning network will start with environment. It will start with where are we? And some of these learning networks actually are conferences and conventions that actually physically take place somewhere in the world. Some of them are actual centers that you can go to. And some of them are online where people actually connect virtually. And I believe they really are going to be virtual reality in the coming years as well. And so whereas someone like Mark Zuckerberg will say that virtual reality is the next social platform, I personally believe it's going to be the next learning platform. It's going to be the platform by which we can actually connect and directly get experiences as well as actually pass knowledge to each other of what really is working and what's not, and then use that in the real world as well. So the whole concept of environment, which is where are we showing up, which is in the right environment. I believe there's going to be environments which are going to be really powerful for exponential learning. Education, what does it mean? How do we actually then share with each other in a way that we can learn? I think that's really going to be changing pretty massively in the coming years. And then entrepreneurship, which is how we're going to make the most of this, or where we'll go from here, which is all about basically creating a net positive from it. If you're in an environment where that's happening, then straight away your brain starts to focus at those same questions that allow you to get there too. And we've done this over the last day and a half, right? Like we're actually all learning from each other and then sharing that learning. And the process we even go through to actually get people to share and then to see where the learning goes from there. Or the process we just had with Gordon, where like who can jump in and actually say, well, here's another distinction. And we're all learning new things ourselves from that whole process. I learned from that process. Michelle learned from that process. Everyone did. And so we all come out of it as students. So that whole concept of these 3 keys, if we're always saying, are we actually questioning the way we're actually managing the environment? How do we make the environment self-sustainable on a global level? Are we really questioning education and how are we making sure it's actually keeping up with the pace of change? And are we really understanding what entrepreneurship is, which isn't just having a business, but it's making a net positive in everything that we're doing, and then we share that out there. That becomes the imperative for where I believe we're going in the world today. Take that concept one step further and say, we're here in Africa. Where in Africa has this happened before, where a learning community has been connected together? And the answer is, it has happened here before with monkeys. So this is Jane Goodall. I had a chance to meet Jane Goodall with my kids, with my family in the Green School. So she came and actually was the person who gave the final talk at the Green School for the graduating class. And she told her story about how from a young age she had always just had a love of nature and she wanted to go out there and make a difference with the animals. She got posted to Tanzania, where they were doing studies with the chimpanzees. And she was the first person at that time to name the chimps. Because until then, they just had numbers, right? So the scientific processes don't give them names, right? So they all had numbers. So she actually named them. And then she said, my goal is not to be learning about the chimpanzees. My goal is to learn with the chimpanzees. If you look her up online on Wikipedia or any of her biographies, you'll see that until today, she is still the only person, not just a woman, but the only person who's actually been fully accepted into a chimpanzee tribe by the chimpanzees. So she was in a tribe of 22, and they all rank each other so that you know who's the most important. She was 22nd, right? She was the last, but she was still in it. They still basically saw her as part of them. And that whole way that they then created that whole way to learn, where she then really revolutionized the whole way that we look at animals as a result of doing that. And it's amazing what nature can teach us, but only if we're actually willing to hear and to learn that as well. I wanted to put this up here because I thought it was a really good quote as well, which is only if we understand will we care, only if we care will we help, and only if we help shall all be saved. I think that that's just so powerful because it's about the giving which actually makes it happen, but you can't be giving until you actually have that understanding that you're in a trusted circle in the first place, or else you're always going to hold something back. So I believe every learning network is going to have one thing at its core, which is going to be trust. And it's going to be that ability for us to know when you step into it, you're being trusted to add value to it. And you have that ability to know that your real value isn't going to be, are you someone who's trusted to teach? It's going to be, are you someone who's trusted to learn? So have you enjoyed this little talk?
Yeah.
Has it been valuable?
Yes.
All right. Please take a moment and just share on your table what you heard. What was one big thing from it? We'll keep the recording going, right? We'll just take a couple of sharings in a moment from this, but give you a moment to just share what's the biggest thing that came out of this little session. Okay, we've got a microphone or a couple of microphones. All right, okay. So we're just going to open this up for anyone who'd like to share. Who would like to share what was the main takeaway just from my little piece there? Come over to Jack to begin with. Jack from Wales, Smart Home Wales. Can we give Jack a round of applause? Can we see Jack on the camera so we can see that? Come around this way, Jack, so we can see you here as well. Alrighty.
Yeah, the takeaway I got from that was this is basically the future of what everyone's going to interact. Like, you know, going from social media to one big massive consciousness, one big massive brain, different industries interacting, learning from each other, and then that just accelerates the progress to, you know, disrupt different industries, and it's going to be faster than ever with the social platform.
Yeah, you know, kids already are doing this. I mean, my kids do this. If they've got an issue at school or whatever, they'll just straight away go online and chat with each other, or like, you know, they'll chat with someone else they know, and they'll find the answer because they're already in a discovery mode because that's how they go about doing it. And so they're having to go through this whole structured industrial learning that we've put them through, but the way they actually learn is already different, which is pretty incredible. And so they're going to do it with or without us, right? It's just whether we keep up enough to be of any significance while that transition happens.
I've actually got a point to back that up. I've learned more on YouTube than I did in school.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. All right, very cool. Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Who else would like to share? All right, Joshua. Microphone there.
Thank you. I think if we look at if we combine the fact that money is live and accelerating, and with the growing iceberg and the learning networks, if you combine that, you realize that if we learn from each other and we share with each other, that as the money accelerates, we will all be sharing more and more because it will be all moving within our ecosystem.
Yes.
In which all of us can grow together.
Yeah. No, awesomely. Oh, okay, very good. Thank you, Joshua, for that. I think this is one of the biggest things. Most of the time with social networks, when we're sharing something, we're thinking, would this be something interesting to other people? As opposed to, is this something specifically that I'm adding value to make it more learnable or make it more available, right? So because social networks just aren't set up that way. They're not set up to actually to teach people things, and they're not even like grouped up in terms of people of like minds that are trying to learn the same thing either. So there is this element which is very different, and we're going to really see this. And I'm seeing this already with Genius U and so on, when we're actually looking at a piece of information and saying, right, well, I know there's people in this network that if the right people got this right information right now, it would be the most relevant for them. In my mind, other people might not agree, but I'm going to put it out there to say that for this specific group in this way, this would be most valuable. And then others can choose to agree with that or not. And in the same way that you can go to Amazon and you can find out what's the most valuable book specifically for a genre like business or leadership. Now we'll be talking about a specific book specifically for someone who happens to be in a business in Africa as a startup in environment to make a difference in the energy industry. Here's the best book to read today, or here is the best post to look at, or here's the best piece of news, or here's the best person to contact. And for us to actually have that just being filtered through to us because we're all adding into it is going to be phenomenal. I mean, I think that's going to, and that's what is going to be the structure that's going to allow us to basically capture and, if anything, slow down technology growth, because a lot of technology has been growing just for the sake of it, as opposed to because it's relevant to something that's actually going to add value today to everybody as well. Yeah, take another one. We'll take two more.
Stand up, please.
That was so amazing. I'm still processing. And I'm processing from the shift from the capitalist money egocentric approach to the more caring economy, that the learning networks are a vehicle for the collective unconscious. And I've lost it now. It's coming. I know it's coming.
You need a learning network that can just zap into your brain.
Yeah. It's like 3 C's that came to me: consciousness, caring, and conversations, pulling through the learning networks. Yeah. So we're shifting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. We're shifting to the we state. The we, from the I to the we.
Yeah. All right.
That's amazing.
So my name is Angus. What's been really interesting over the last couple of years is this concept of abundance, and you hear it in terms of money and sharing, but actually bringing that concept right back to its home, which is an abundance in learning, and not only by being really careful about what we hold to ourselves, we're actually reducing the knowledge and the good that we can do. But by working with others in a learning state, where I'm being abundant with my knowledge and my insights, it comes back to me far greater and far faster than if I try and hold something old style where knowledge was power. Now setting knowledge free empowers everyone and will empower me more.
Yeah.
So this concept of exponential learning through abundant knowledge or the knowledge network is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think one of the most important aspects about this is this distinguishing between knowledge, which is what clearly artificial intelligence and technology has done a really good job at organizing, right? I mean, there's no one who could say that the internet hasn't done a great job at actually organizing knowledge. But it hasn't done that for wisdom. Right? Because wisdom is a very different thing. Wisdom is a very human thing. Wisdom is something that is not just about, well, here's the thing to look at. It's like, well, here's different ways to look at that, or here's how experience plays into what could be the right thing. Most artificial intelligence is backwards looking, as in, if I go to Amazon, I'm looking at a book because Amazon's looked at what other books are bought, and then said, well, based on those books, here's the book maybe you should buy. And that can only ever be basically just reinforcing my past habits, as opposed to wisdom, which is actually what allows you to break out from your past habits by having the value of expertise of others to actually say, well, this is the reason you're actually in that habit, and you actually need to be thinking in an entirely different way to move forward. And there so far has not been any structure to organize wisdom. And I think what's really interesting about these learning networks and the way that they're now evolving is that they're really the first time that I've seen that there's an actual system that actually solves that big dilemma which basically Buckminster Fuller came up with, which he called the final exam. And the final exam is this whole concept that, and he said this in the 1970s, where technology is already accelerating far beyond the pace of human consciousness to be able to catch up with it. We've already got all the technology in the world to solve all of the largest problems we have, because they're all distribution problems. It's not like, people are hungry because we don't have food. We've got plenty of food. It's just not distributed properly. Or it's not, people are educated or not getting education. It's not because we don't have the education. It's just not distributed properly, and so on. Technology actually solves all those problems. The only reason we haven't solved those problems is because of human consciousness. So his final exam concept is, will human consciousness be able to accelerate and catch up with technology, because only then can we harness it properly, and only then can we actually solve all the grand challenges. And if we do catch up, then we pass the exam. If we don't catch up, technology will continue to accelerate beyond our ability to harness it, which means inevitably it will destroy us. And that's why it's the final exam, because there ain't no other ones that come after this, right? And but he was a system thinker. And the fact that this concept of learning networks is a system that allows us to actually accelerate our own learning growth, or more importantly, our own consciousness, so we can harness it. I think that is one of the most positive things in the last year, as I've been thinking about these and watching what's happening in the world, most positive developments, which is not yet at its highest level, which is why we're not seeing them everywhere and people aren't talking about learning networks yet, but they will be. Just like people weren't talking about social networks when Facebook started, but then they started talking about it. I think that's where things are really going to shift. So, Gordon?
Thank you. Do you want me to come up?
Yeah, you can just, so
right,
people can see you. But
if we take that quote, any of we understand, we care, I want to relate it back to what happened with me just early on, and that is about empathy. I believe it's about empathy and understanding. And ultimately, I think that the only way we can save ourselves from AI and technology is to build those moments of empathy between people, because AI won't be able to give us the empathy. And it's that level of human connection which is actually going to save us from technology, and which is actually what we want to develop amongst everyone.
By the way, my personal belief, I believe we're going to have AIs shortly, and in fact, if you go to Japan, you're going to find they're already existing, that are more empathetic than most humans. That because they understand how to read your features, they understand how to reflect, they understand how to come from a place where they're able to do that. Now, of course, at the moment, they're just being programmed for basically, input and response, right? But just like the Go, where you can multiply that millions of times to really get all the different variations, and then they can choose for themselves based on that, it really is just a matter of time before we're going to have people falling in love with their machines, right? We have love robot hotels in Japan already, where you can go and fall in love with a robot. And weird as that sounds, yeah, there's enough science fiction films that become a science fiction fact. But this is where the blurring happens between technology and machinery and ourselves. And if you really want to see that blurring, it's really easy, right? It's just basically seeing how attached we already are to our mobile phones, for example, right? So I really think that what we're going to see going forward is through these elements where we actually are being drawn to them because of the human desire to improve ourselves, right? And to improve ourselves in an empathetic way, because we actually are wanting to improve ourselves for the whole. And not everyone wants to do that. Some of us want to try and basically get out there and enrich ourselves at the expense of others. I mean, there's no question there are people like that as well. And we have lived in a world for some time where actually it's quite easy for someone who wants to take that route to do that and to hold on to power and to basically hide whatever they're doing to others, or have the government's forgiveness and get bailouts and all those kind of things that we are so against at the moment. But something happens with the concept of learning networks, I believe, where it actually makes it almost impossible when you're in any network which is growing at exponential rate to be in there and to abuse trust, because you'll be ejected from it. And if you're ejected from it, which means you're not able to learn at the same speed as the people who are in there are learning, then that clearly means you're not going to be able to keep up, which means that there's going to be absolutely no financial benefit to trying to go out there and cheat people or trying to go out there and actually get one over on people, which I think is a really good thing. And it's just a natural process of setting up a system which technology has allowed us to do, that we can then become more human. So lots of paradoxes, lots of conversations. This is not the answers. This is opening up new questions. But this is something that I'm going to be sharing quite a bit more on our Fast Forward events. At the same time, the Fast Forward events themselves are another learning network. Our partner community is a learning network. Our Crystal Circle is another learning network. We've got within Entrepreneur's Institute multiple learning networks happening already, which are kind of like little bubbles. And that's why I really believe that we're not going into a world of globalization anymore. We're going into a world of globularization, where everyone's kind of finding their own little bubble and seeing where they interact with others as well. So thank you very, very much, everyone, for listening. Give yourself a round of applause for sharing. Thank you. All right. Back to Michelle.
Wow. Give Mr. Roger Hamilton a round of applause. Take a bow.